This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 157. 6. This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 156.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Marjaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back. We have a great interview today with someone who's not an SE. And by the way, I am your host, Ramsey Marjaba, otherwise known as Ramsey Lias Naim Khali Musa Khali Marjaba. I'm here with my co-host, Benny Kunungo.
Hello.
In Lebanon, we don't have like a middle name. The middle name is usually your father's name. So I just combined everybody's, like my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, which ends up being Ramzi Lias Naim Khalil Musa Khalil Marjaba.
Very nice.
So I have like a few generations. And also in Lebanon, like, or I think it's anywhere, might be in different places as well. Generally speaking, like the son, they name their sons after their father. So I'm assuming it's Ramzi Islam Khalil Musa Khalil Musa Khalil Musa Khalil Musa Khalil Musa Khalil. It's like, in math you have like 3.3333 and you have a bar over the number. I feel like that's pretty much it. Anyways, we're going down a weird rabbit hole.
It does roll off the tongue. Just as a lot of the results rolled off the survey line into the consensus survey that we talked about today during the podcast.
I thought I was doing badly in this intro, but no, you joined me in the badly stuff. All right, we're talking to John Cook, who is the marketing director at Consensus, and he worked last year on an SE survey where they talk about the salaries, commissions, hours worked, etc. And he's doing it again this year. And we're talking about that specifically. Right? We're going to talk about I love the fact that he didn't know what sales engineering was when he started talking about sales engineering, not like right now, but when he first started talking to Garen Hess, who's been on the show previously as well, link in the show notes. He didn't know, he thought we were BDR. So I thought we were sales when we joined. So it was interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I think we should get right into it. It's definitely a great show just to get some insight with respect to what is being said about sales engineers, and why not know a little bit more about people that you call your peers. I mean, let's know about other sales.
Before we jump there, I just want to let people know that I am speaking at Demo Fest this year, which is like kind of the SE festival or
conference for SEs.
Conference. Thank you. I forgot that word. That Consensus is throwing. So I'll be speaking on May 12th. Hold on. I have it in front of me. I had it in front of me. May 12th, Wednesday, May 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern. And it's talking about getting the most out of your salesperson because, we need to. All right, let's jump into the show. Nothing else to say. Let's talk to John. Good afternoon, John, or is it noon for you? I don't know. You're in California, right?
No, actually, I'm in the Midwest.
Okay, so
yeah, I'm
afternoon.
Missouri.
Okay, so you're good afternoon, I guess.
Yeah,
you as well.
You too.
How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Great. Yeah, awesome. Happy to be on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So maybe we'll start off by introducing yourself, what you do, who you're with, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, you bet. So my name is John Cook, and I'm the senior marketing manager for Consensus. I don't know if you know anything about Consensus, but we do interactive video demos to help pre-sales teams scale.
Okay, so we've had Garen on the show actually not too long ago.
That's right.
Trying to bring it up pretty quickly, and it's 139, episode 139. If anybody wants to check it out.
Jose as well, just very recently.
Jose is not with Consensus, so that's.
Wasn't he go for a bit?
No. Anyways, moving on.
I don't remember Jose.
Okay, never mind. That my mistake. I was going to say that there was somebody else. This is all being recorded, so this is bad. But I feel like there's somebody else I know that worked at Consensus that also knew Jose from there. But I am clearly wrong, so never mind.
Maybe one day there will be a Jose. The Jose that we know, I don't think he's ever been part of Consensus. Anyways, that's why I like doing it live, because we can't hide our mistakes. Well, semi-live, I guess. So you're a marketing manager. You're not a sales engineer, but you guys do a lot for sales.
No. Yeah. So I'm the author of the study that we'll be discussing today, and since joining Consensus, we've dived in really heavily into sales engineering. It's our one spot that we focus on. So all of our research, all of our study, all of our material that we publish is all about sales engineering. So it's become a real kind of a passion.
So what did you know about sales engineering before actually joining Consensus?
You know what? I made the mistake of thinking it was BDR. Like I was that raw to it, right? Like, you ever hear like, oh, I'm in pre-sales. Oh, business development. Like,
That's hilarious because I joined the company thinking I was a sales guy of sorts.
Yeah, right.
But a technical sales guy. It turns out, no, there's an actual sales guy that does the selling part. I'm the technical person only. So
yeah,
I don't know who's worse, me or you. But
me, definitely me.
I don't know. I took a job thinking as a sales engineer, thinking I was a salesperson, but so
that's pretty rough. All right, I guess.
Yeah. So, all right, how did you when you became the marketing manager for Consensus, thinking that SEs are BDRs? What surprised you initially about the role?
So we weren't always. This became. This was a bit of a journey. When I first joined Consensus, they had use cases that were all over the place in marketing and sales and channel and all these kinds of things, and they were all working pretty well, but we weren't getting the traction that we wanted, and so we decided to kind of go back to our roots. A little bit about the software. So just as a background, Consensus, what you do is your sales engineering team will use Consensus to build like a library of reusable interactive video demos, right? And the sales sends those out on demand, and it's like a chameleon asset, so it'll automatically personalize to whoever you send it to. So there are a lot of different use cases for that, and it tracks engagement and it gives that all back to you, and it'll reveal stakeholders as it kind of goes viral and gets shared around. So they were all working pretty well, but we decided to really go back to our roots, where the incentive to initially create the software was actually Garen, the founder, had been doing. He'd been in a sales engineering role with his company, and he'd done like 6 demos in a day, and they were all the same. All had the same questions asked and all that kind of thing. And he was like, I just did this 6 times. There's got to be. This isn't the conversation I want to have every time. I want to get into the deeper things, right? I want to get into like the deeper discovery and talking about differentiators and all that kind of stuff. And so he's like, there's got to be a way to automate this in such a way that it's a personalized interaction. And so that was actually how the software got created in the first place. So we decided to go back to those roots and focus completely on sales engineering. And that was when we had that conversation. And he was like, we're gonna focus on pre-sales. And I was like, pre-sales, like focus exclusively on BDR? And he's like, no, that's not pre-sales.
Okay.
And so
before going, do you mind just pushing the mic a little bit away from your mouth? It is doing a lot.
Not at all. Yeah.
Thanks.
Right, we'll see if I can pop less.
That's way better.
Maybe. It's all good. I think we're okay. It's just that might help. So you already had the job when they started talking about doing the pre-sales, focusing on pre-sales.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right. And how was the journey into figuring out what pre-sales was?
Oh, it's been brilliant. So just mostly because pre-sales, it's such a unique set of problems, really. I was talking to Peter Cohen. I don't know if you know who Peter Cohen is, but
yep.
But I was talking to Peter the other day, and he was relating that pre-sales hasn't changed. He's been in it for 35 years, and he's like, it's been pretty much the same role that whole 35 years. Think about every other role, how much every other role has changed. And he was like, right down to the pain points, right down to talking about getting a seat at the table, where sales kind of tends to have more of a voice in the C-suite, and maybe pre-sales doesn't. He's like, all of that's been the same for that long. And so as we've dived in and as I've gotten to know pre-sales, it's just a very unique set of problems that they have to solve. There's the problem of scale, and there's the problem of qualifying, opportunities before you dedicate pre-sales people to them. And there's the there's sometimes there's silos of information that's hard to get access to if you're sales, and getting somebody's schedule. It's just been fascinating, and we like it because it dovetails so well with what we do, and we can help. So
I guess to that point, if you don't mind me asking, just having
Yeah.
gone through the journey of discovering pre-sales, I suppose, and just learning a little bit about what it's all about, given your marketing background, especially, I suppose, how would you maybe pitch pre-sales to the uninitiated, in a nice, short, quick way?
You know what? That's like that's a bit of a challenge that I've been tackling ever since we started on this journey. Is whenever we talk about what we do, we have to talk about pre-sales first, right? And so I often say, I often start with, have you ever bought B2B software? And has it ever been like a complex software, like, an ERP or a CRM or something like that? And we start there. And if they have, then I point out that very often the person who demoed the software to them was not their sales rep, right? And I don't want to get into this whole kind of misconception that demos is all that pre-sales does, but that's very often the first exposure that a buyer will have to pre-sales. And so if they've seen that, then we can go from there, right? And I explain that the when it comes to complex software, the sales rep is not actually the subject matter expert. They're not the software expert or product expert. That's pre-sales. Pre-sales knows all of the deep answers. And so whenever you have an answer that stumps the sales rep, they call the pre-sales guys. And the pre-sales guys parachute in and kind of will let you know if it's integrations, or if it's deep reporting, or can it do this specific thing that you need done, right? And so that's how I usually explain pre-sales to people.
Makes sense. Yeah, it's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, I like talking to people who were never exposed to sales engineering and then find out what it is, because they have a different view. I've been in it for 6 years. Obviously, I joined not knowing what it was, or 7 years, but I've been in it, so I know what it is, and I like talking to random people on the street. Like, hey, do you know what sales engineering is? No? All right. Well,
Yeah.
So I like that you're bringing that view, and sometimes we have to simplify it in order for people to understand what we actually do. We
Right.
work a lot behind the scenes as well.
If I jump straight into like talking about they do demos and RFPs and POCs, and the guys are going to
What's a POC?
like, okay, yeah, right, exactly.
I love acronyms. Okay, so you've been doing this for a few years now.
Yep.
Focusing on sales engineering, and you created this report. You're the author of the report, and it's called Sales Engineering Compensation and Workload Report. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
What prompted you?
2021.
Yeah. I'm looking at the 2021. I don't have the 2021 one yet.
Yeah, no, it's not out yet. It's coming out like in the next few days, but yeah.
All right. Well, maybe it'll be out by the time we publish this episode, and we'll have the link in the show notes if people want to get it. What prompted you to actually start that?
Yeah. So there were a couple of things. With pre-sales, what we found was there are a few things from a marketing standpoint. Actually, there were some challenges where there wasn't a huge community. I mean, you guys know this. You guys are kind of starting a community around the podcast, right? And there wasn't a lot of community for pre-sales to access, and pre-sales teams really kind of had to not start from scratch, because there are people who've been in pre-sales for a long time who can give these insights. But unless you have those people on board, there weren't a lot of places to go to find out what the benchmarks are for a pre-sales team. We had this discussion with James over at PSC. There's this question: what constitutes a high-performing pre-sales team? What should it look like? What's the right ratio of AEs to SEs? How long are people waiting to get a demo from the time that they ask for one? All of these things, and then how long. One of the things we incorporated into this year's study was how long what kind of hours are SEs working, because they're in such demand, and we're seeing that demand go up. What does all that look like, and what are the right numbers? And nobody knew. And when we found people were like, when we would ask people what their numbers are, they'd be like, "Yeah, I think we know what this is. Do you know what the normal is? Do you know what the norm is?" And everybody's kind of just trying to find their way along, and we thought we can answer those questions. And so we set out. We started broad, and we gradually as we get more and more responses to the survey, we can get narrower and narrower and start to answer these questions for people in, as I say, starting in broad terms. But the dream is eventually to be able to, and we can do a lot of that this year because we got so many responses. But the ideal is we can answer questions for people who are thinking, what do people do whose job looks like mine, whose position, whose industry, whose all of this looks like me, and get very granular and specific about it. So,
is there something that you found surprising you didn't see coming?
Yeah. I guess I'd gotten a little bit of a heads up to it. Unqualified demos was one of those where we were like, what, really? Like 1 in 3? That's the average. Like half of our respondents said that more than 1 in 3 demos is unqualified. That's a huge time sink. Like, what is going on? And there are a couple of others. For instance, seeing so many this year. We talked about quota. Seeing so many SEs carrying quota. I don't know if some people are shocked to see that many SEs carrying quota, and some people are shocked that there are people who don't carry quota. So it kind of depends on which end you're coming from. And there are some others about compensation, what happens to compensation over years of experience as a practitioner. Got some great insight into that watching it rise and then taper off and that kind of thing. So I think that's going to be really valuable for people to be able to see.
So even Benny and I were both like jotting down notes like crazy, just to follow up. So 1 to 3 non-qualified demos. Did they explain how that happens, or is it that?
So the question we actually asked was, what percentage of your live demos would you describe as unqualified or underqualified? And that was it. And so they marked a percentage, right?
Right.
And so specifically the question was, what percentage of your product demonstrations would you classify as unqualified or underqualified? And the fact that there are just massive, like I say, the median is 30%. That means half of the responses were 30% or higher and half were 30% or lower. And it's definitely, it's just crazy to me to see that much, that kind of a strain on the time of an organization that if you could point to one problem that's really, really tough in pre-sales, it's scale, right? It's being able to meet the demand with something other than just hiring more people. Just hire more people. Oftentimes that's the only solution that you can see to increasing demand on pre-sales.
This is such an interesting problem. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, I want to be part of, as an SE, I want to be part of discovery calls to be able to qualify calls." But then I talk to a lot of companies that don't have that system. They say, "Oh, they don't want to waste our time and bringing us into the discovery call." I'm like, "Yeah, but I think they're wasting your time making you do a demo
that right?
that's
Yes.
not qualified." Because the discovery call, and within half hour you can tell if it's qualified or non-qualified.
Sometimes within 2 minutes,
yeah,
right? You can tell.
And then you can dig in deeper if you need to. But a demo, you're like, unless it's the same demo you're doing every single time, then they don't need you, honestly. They can use consensus, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're going to have to spend time preparing for it, creating a story, I find that insane that they just don't get SEs involved earlier.
Yeah. And very often, you hear this refrain commonly throughout the industry, but, the AE will say, well, I did qualify them. And, they may be talking about banter something like
Yeah.
that. And it's a very different discovery to what pre-sales is doing. As a matter of fact, one of the questions that we asked about key activities this year. Okay. So, and by key activities, what we're talking about is the question was which key activities, max of 4. So you could multi-select up to 4 answers. Which key activities would have the greatest impact on your success if you or your team, if you're a leader, could spend more time executing them? In other words, what activities move the needle the most, right? And the number 1 was discovery. The number 1 response was discovery. If we could spend more time, if we had time back in our work week, this is where we could spend it to move the needle the most.
Like I don't know, Benny and I, we've been preaching about discovery for a long time, because even those 2 qualified demos, if you didn't do the discovery, your demo probably didn't answer the question that they were asking.
Right?
Yeah, because I've told the story before. I've been to demos where my sales guy qualified it and the information was completely wrong, and I had to kind of spin something up from like out of nowhere. And most of the time it didn't lead to a sale.
Oh man.
Because I wasn't part of the discovery, because I could have asked simple questions that would point me in the right direction. I could have created a story. I could have figured out what when they talk about pain points, for at least in my industry, salespeople don't know the pain points because they're not in testing. They sell stuff. And they don't know, like if the test manager tells them something about what they do, it will not register them as a pain point unless they were in that area at some point in their career. So
right, exactly. And this is why you see oftentimes. So we also asked about where your organization hired their last 10 SEs from, and one of what we find is that oftentimes they're hired directly from the industry that they're serving, right? As opposed to from a sales background necessarily. They're hired sometimes. I actually, anecdotally, do you know the guys over at the Access Group? Adam Freeman and those guys. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Oh, okay, great.
He has a podcast, 2 Peas in a Pod, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah. So he's a pre-sales leader over at Access Group, and I remember him telling me about one of their SEs who was in the hospitality industry, and he was a chef. That was his background, right? And so he could see, and this is part of why it takes so long oftentimes to mint a fully capable pre-sales rep, is because you have to have that combination of industry fluency.
Yep.
And that industry fluency isn't something that you often find in the AE as much as it is in the pre-sales rep. So that discovery has to involve pre-sales.
Yeah. Like in my experience, from the times that people tried to hire account managers for the companies that I've worked for, previous industry experience was not really a requirement.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Like you hit your quota 5 years in a row. You were selling knives. Come sell networking equipment.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an exaggeration, by the way.
No, I know what you're talking about, but the sales skill, and it's not that salespeople don't bring value in their sales skills, right? That's a specific skill set, and oftentimes that's one that let's see how to be tactful. I don't know, it's just lacking in a pre-sales rep, right? They have a different drive and so on, at different goals. What's interesting though is that what we're finding is that buyers are increasingly preferring pre-sales sales motions to standard sales motions, right? That's why pre-sales is in such demand, is when it comes to buying, the AE is going to provide value, no doubt, but when it comes to how the buyer wants to buy, pre-sales interactions most closely mirror that, and sales isn't the only organization that is seeing a drift towards a drift of their sales motion, of their activities kind of going towards pre-sales. Marketing is the same. Buyers are becoming less tolerant of my job and the things that marketing typically produces. They want to see what pre-sales can show, and what only pre-sales can show them. They want the specifics. They come to the conversations better educated than ever before. They're giving vendors less time than ever before to make their case, as far as a percentage of the whole buying process.
Yeah.
Right. So so that's, that's how pre-sales is it's kind of what I'm calling it, the rise of pre-sales. I mean, it's becoming much more central to the process.
Yeah.
What you mentioned there, it's pretty key. Like that whole idea about customers coming in more informed than they ever have been before. I mean, like it's so true. I mean, typically, or I don't know, I'm only so young, I suppose, only so old, so I don't know how sales necessarily occurred back in the day, but I'd imagine that, I mean, a large part of what a salesperson would have done back in the day is kind of bring you into the fold as a customer, kind of get you comfortable with who you are or who I am as a vendor or whatever. And, just again, just get very comfortable and just make you comfortable with me. And then when I need to bring on the technical guns to get you to really come in and buy into our solution, then I bring on my sales engineer, or bring on somebody technical to do that, I guess. But like you said, now that everybody is already kind of more informed as to what you're all about, and you could see customer reviews and things and kind of get a sense of referrals even before, without even having to actually, get a sense as to what current customers are experiencing without even having to actually speak to anybody. Just kind of getting right down to the nitty gritty is totally the most valuable stuff, I'd imagine, in the sales cycle. And so, yeah, I mean, you'll even see salespeople, I think, anyways, that are even a little bit technical will tend to find a little bit more success than those that aren't, just because they're able to provide that additional information that otherwise they couldn't get.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say that pre-sales is somehow better than sales or anything like that. That's not what this is about. It's really about, so the job of sales and really pre-sales has always been to make the buying process as pleasant and frictionless as possible, right? That's always been the aim. Now, before the advent of the internet and things like that, then sales had a role to play that involved making the much more sort of reassuring the customer and bringing them into a process that inspired confidence and all of these things, right? And so the AE had this major role in that. And as things have evolved, and it's crazy to me that, I mean, it's, gosh, I'm 42, and I'm still talking about eras before the internet, right? But with the buyer is just less tolerant of that. Their pleasant buying experience. Maybe we blame Amazon or Spotify or any of these guys who made it just so frictionless to get actually in and using. And you're seeing, we saw the major shift towards product-led marketing, product-led sales over on the consumer side. But B2B sales is very, very different. And B2B sales is still a fraught process from a buyer perspective, right? From a buyer perspective, it's, I don't know anybody who thinks of B2B sales as a pleasant prospect when you're buying software. You've got to see a lot. There's a lot to digest. And then there's a lot of political capital that goes into being a champion for a given product and pushing that within your organization. And there's a lot of risk involved. Once you say yes, or once you make that purchase is often kind of a millstone around your neck until you can show value, right? So the path to value needs to be fast. So my point in all of this is just that it's not a terribly pleasant experience to buy software much of the time, B2B software much of the time. And so buyers are really kind of showing where they're willing to spend their time, and they'll tell you at the beginning of your process when they come in, and the AE is, hates to hear this, but the buyer's already gone through this massive discovery on their side, discovering what you guys do, and they're like, okay, I pretty sure I know what I want. I'd like to see the software, and you're like, whoa, hold up, let's make sure that this is, that we know who you are, and then we'll get to the software. And it's not that's not going to hold up long term.
Yeah.
People are going to want to see it sooner rather than later and get the buying motions that they want.
Yeah, I do want to point out that we do make a lot of jokes on AE's expenses, but it's like, basketball players, point guards make fun of centers, and centers make fun of point guards.
Yeah,
we're all part of the same team. We all want to win, and we all have different jobs. ever since I've become a hybrid, I have a lot more respect for salespeople because I've seen.
That's a great way to get respect for sales, is do it for a little while.
Yeah, walk in their shoes, and the things that they go through that is not really fun. We get to do the fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
At least that's how I feel. As an SE, we get to do the fun stuff. And for customers, I sell hardware. I don't even sell software. And I still get emails from my customers like, hey, I did my research. I saw you have this, this, and that. Send me quotes for this. I mean, what? No, wait. That's not how it works.
You just wrote your own prescription, right?
Yeah, you can't tell. You can't give me that. Like, I want to talk to you. No, just send me the quotes. I'm comparing you to the other guy. Oh, right?
Yeah. And that's how that's going, you know. And can you imagine now selling software where YouTube is a thing, where if they want to see the software and you're like, great, my SE is going to be available in our research says 5 days is the median.
Yeah.
5 business days is the median delay between a customer saying, I want to see it. I want to see your software and actually getting on the phone with them, right?
Yep.
Or on a Zoom call or whatever it is you're going to do. And that's 5 days where they can jump on YouTube and be like, I want to see the software now. How about that? And it's not going to be your company usually that's showing it. It's going to be somebody else who's reviewing it, you know, wherever they might be from and whatever good job they might be doing or poor job they might be doing. That's how they get the first look at your software.
And here's the problem I'm having. I feel like I'm hogging the mic, by the way, Benny. I'll let you ask whatever questions you want after this. But I want to do YouTube videos for my customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they want to go look at YouTube, I want to be the guy doing YouTube videos.
Of course.
The company doesn't let you. Not all companies want to control the branding. They want to control that. So you end up not doing anything because you can't do it.
Yeah,
and this
that's
is something
not going to hold up long term.
Well, we're working on fixing that. But and my company isn't the only company that does it. A lot of companies want to control the narrative.
Oh, do I know? This is what we, you know, and this is a huge deal.
If I want to go like Cisco might be the ones that like in my industry that does it quite a bit. But if I want to go learn about Nokia or Juniper or whatever, I have to find like a third party person creating his own YouTube videos about it.
Right. So. And they're doing it. And that means that even if you don't want to create YouTube videos, that doesn't change the fact that they're created.
Yeah, you're not controlling it either. You're not telling the story. They're just showing how it works, right? You're not telling how it helps.
And they might be comparing you with competition, and they may be doing it well or not well. They may hit true points or untrue points. I mean, and this is why I say that. This is this is a piece that I'm working on right now, which is so you guys get a little bit of a preview into one of our upcoming articles. But I think one of the upcoming sort of casualties of the rise of pre-sales is actually marketing, because people are becoming much less tolerant of the kind of content that marketing traditionally puts out. And people have been talking about this for a long time. This is just an evolution. This is just it coming into the B2B space, because in B2B software marketing, people still are intent on putting a lot of motion graphics and sizzle into their pieces. And frankly, nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear it. And if you were to produce 2 videos, if you had one pre-sales guy record his screen for 10 minutes and do just a standard walkthrough, capturing every cough, every sniffle, everything, okay, and post that, and then you had somebody spend $40,000 on a marketing video with everything perfect, with the perfect voiceover, and get the music, and you get the actors and all of that kind of, there's no comparison in which one is going to get the greater engagement. The pre-sales guy is going to win without even, but it's not going to be close between the two as far as who gets the engagement. So pre-sales motions, pre-sales discussions, pre-sales content is what buyers want.
Seems to be like, even just in that example right there with having the more human or having the more raw video, I suppose. We talk a lot also on the show about just the effectiveness of sales engineers being human and just being personable, particularly for those that are super technical, just to kind of open up a little more in the effectiveness of that. But then even just in your example, just the fact that, or rather when a person or when a prospect is able to connect with a vendor or a person on a human or at a human connection, just your chances, I'd imagine anyways, of being able to close that person just skyrockets just due to the fact that you've bonded or connected with them more so than a perfectly curated marketing.
I would say yes, except that it depends on what that interaction is like. Simply, human interaction is not, as a buyer, if buyers were craving human interaction just for the sake of human interaction, then they wouldn't be doing all of their research before they come to you, right? They really like to self-educate. It's not that they don't like human interaction per se, but they want the right kind. They want high value human interaction. If I'm going to go and talk to somebody who's at this organization, I want to make sure that they are making good use of my time. Does that make sense? So, for instance, this is why you'll find, and tell me if you do not find this, but it seems to me pretty common, that you'll find that by the time you get a meeting as a pre-sales rep, by the time you get a meeting with a prospect, they're not always particularly receptive to your discovery efforts, right? They've just gone through several human interactions that qualified them, and they really just want you to show them what they want to see, right? And this is kind of what you were talking about a little bit earlier. So it places a huge burden on us to make sure that those human interactions are high leverage, that they are sharp, that they give the prospect what they want when they want it. Because, if you launch in with, hey, let's chew the fat for a bit. It's not that you can't establish rapport, but there's only so much. It's like I say, it's sharp. Expectations are pretty sharp in this regard, and it's easy to put a foot wrong.
Yeah. What I've noticed. For people, customers don't really enjoy, like, they like human connection, but they don't enjoy sales teams connection, right? There's always, when you're meeting a salesperson, he wants to sell you something. That's the end goal,
right?
So they don't want, that's why people like to do their research. Like, I want to buy a car, right?
Yeah.
I've been doing my research for like 3 months now, and
right.
I'm not going to buy.
Are you going to walk onto a lot and say, I know nothing, I'm going to rely entirely on you?
Yeah. I'm
no.
Well, obviously I would never do that.
Right.
I'm agreeing with you. I just skipped the answer, I guess. But yeah, like, people don't want to do that. But if a pre-sales engineer or a pre-sales advisor, whatever you want to call them, they show up early in the cycle, not after 3 or 4 meetings with the salesperson, first or second meeting with the salesperson. I show up. Initially I would show up to every meeting with my salesperson, because that will allow me to build rapport with them. My title is sales engineer. The focus is more on engineer to the customer.
Yeah.
That allows me to build rapport with them. They don't know I get paid commission, and I don't hide it, but I don't advertise.
It's not what they think of when they hear.
Yeah.
When you hop on the call, right?
I'm the guy who's trying to help. So that builds trust more than rapport. Like, I'm building trust there. And also, when I ask questions, when I answer questions, I do my best not to try to sell them on anything. I'm just trying to understand what the problem is, so I can advise you on the best solution that we can sell. If we can't solve your problem, I'm happy to point you in the right direction. And, next time we see each other, hopefully we can work together. But
and so in the direction I was kind of going in as well, because when I say, like, be a human and kind of make that human connection, it's truly the connection part that's important, as opposed to just, I suppose, the human part. Because you're right, like, you could speak to 6, 7 other people rather, and get the sales pitch that you don't connect with, whereas the connection, that's key as part of it all.
Absolutely.
I do want to ask something else, I suppose. Speaking of connections, and we are kind of all connected by it to a degree, mostly as we're all here at home, working from home, COVID and everything. Did y'all ever look at stress, or I suppose like one's perceived workload, or how much stress they're feeling? I guess either in these times or even just in general, because you mentioned earlier the whole 1 in 3 calls being unqualified. I'd be curious to see if there was any sort of correlation between those that had more unqualified demos that they were doing, if they did tend to find that they were more overloaded or more stressed, which ultimately affects their workload or affects their performance rather in other ways. But COVID has just accentuated that. So I was wondering if that's something you guys looked at.
Not qualitatively as far as kind of a report. We didn't ask specific questions about how sales engineers kind of felt in their job beyond asking them how they felt they were perceived. We asked a little bit about that, but we do ask, for instance, we will have data on what the work week looks like, right? How many hours you typically work in a work week, and what the maximum number of hours you worked in the last, the maximum number of hours you worked over a 7-day period in the last 12 months, right? So your crunch week, what was your worst crunch week over the last 12 months? And I'll be interested to see. We're still mining a little bit of this, but it's very possible that you could see some kind of a correlation between more dense work week, right? A longer work week or a longer crunch week, and a higher number of unqualified demos. We also ask things like how long do demos take in your organization? So, we're getting reports, and that runs the gamut. And we say the way we ask it is include prep time and follow-up time. How many man hours does it take to do a demo? And I think the median is 2.5. But anecdotally, as I talk to customers and so on, we're hearing that those live interactions are taking longer and longer, up to sometimes 2-3 days, for something that was in the past might have been considered a demo because you're showing them through product and all that kind of thing, and they're turning into kind of workshops almost, where you're doing this over an extended period of time. But in answer to answer your question, not specifically about stress level, I guess I would say.
I'm going to turn this around. Benny, you're a sales engineer. How many hours do you work a week?
My boss listening to this? No, I mean, I think it'll vary. Like definitely on average, like you probably have it's the average work week more or less. I mean, especially during COVID, it's funny because like there's so much bleeding between home and work. Like this morning, for example, I woke up at, I don't know, I think it was at 6 or something, and I didn't have anything to do, and I knew I had an errand to run later on in the day, so I worked from 6:30 to 8 just because I figured I'd kind of get that done. I had the time to do it, and frees me up to do other things later. Yeah, so I would probably say about the same. Just when I do that work is definitely not the same.
Right.
Do you feel more stressed or less stressed than when you used to go to the office and do work there?
It's different, only because like I feel a different type of stress, I suppose, than anything else, because I'm in a different job. So I changed jobs, John, for your benefit, during the pandemic.
Okay.
So if I was in my previous place, or while I was at my prior place, I mean, not feeling the stress of wanting to leave that job, I guess. Things were pretty easy just because I'm at home. I wouldn't say I really felt much stress at all. And yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say COVID is putting much of a stress on me at my new place either. The only stress I have is just not feeling like I know the space well enough. And so that's the stress that keeps me learning, keeps me going. But yeah, I wouldn't say I feel any extra stress due to COVID per se.
Okay. So John, we are coming up to the top of the hour, or top of the half hour, hour. Is there anything else that you feel like is interesting that you'd like to share about the report in itself?
Yeah, you bet. So there are some interesting findings. For instance, one that you can look out for when we do the full publication, which is, for instance, we find that sales engineer salary, right? We segment by practitioners or individual contributors. They're often called, and leadership. And where we draw the line is if you're a manager level or above, we called you a leader. And if you're below manager level, then we called you a practitioner or individual contributor. So this is sales engineers, senior sales engineers, principal sales engineers. Sometimes they're have a ton of experience, but they're still doing they're still fulfilling individual contributor roles and that kind of thing. And so we just separated them out that way as practitioners and leaders. And for practitioners, we found that compensation, OTE, what we call OTE, which is on target earnings, right?
Yep.
This is, and the way we ask the question, it's assuming you hit your quota, or if you have, a high, mid, and low goal, assume you hit your mid goal. And what we find is that OTE, it will rise throughout the first 4 years, between 1 and 4 years of experience, and up to 8 years experience. There's the steady rise that you would expect as you get more and more experience in the role. After 8 years, it levels off. And not to say that you can't make more money after 8 years, but the environment that you're in is working against you at that point, because the average is that it's not going to go up by any kind of significant amount after 8 years as an individual contributor.
Is that because the base is it because they're not hitting their quota, or is it their base got higher?
No,
And
this is assuming they hit quota.
Yeah,
all of these responses are assuming they hit quota. So
okay,
it's just that after 8 years, your salary level will get to a point after 8 years of experience where what the data seems to suggest to me is that it's more difficult to justify the increases in salary that you saw during your first 8 years, right? Year on year. Over your first 8 years, it's that's not going to be a linear trajectory as long as you hold the position.
Yeah, I think that's true for most jobs as well.
Yeah, I think it probably would be, but it's just one of those things that it's good to know because not everybody wants to jump into a leadership position and so on and so forth, and maybe that's fine. But
here's an interesting question, at least for me: do leaders make more than on average? Not if they make their quota. Obviously, if they make their quota, they'll do more. But do leaders, on average, make more than their employees?
Base salary is higher.
Base salary is higher.
So base salary is higher, and on-target earnings are higher.
Yeah,
for leaders. Yes.
The reason I was asking is leaders are very dependent on their individual SEs to make their quota. So if some didn't make their quota, how badly are they affected? But I guess it averages off.
So we didn't ask how much people are making if they didn't hit their quota. We assumed they hit quota.
Yeah.
We the way we phrased the question is we assumed everybody hit quota. So we're talking about essentially what their contract looks like, as opposed to what their paycheck actually looked like.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. And I'm looking at the AE to SE ratio. 4-to-1 seems reasonable to me. The 15-to-1 does not.
And yeah, and I know teams that are at 15-to-1. Isn't that crazy? This is what I was asking when I was wondering, like, what constitutes a high performance pre-sales team? Because if you're hitting your numbers at a 15-to-1 ratio, that's madness.
Is that like inside sales SEs, inside SEs, or field SEs?
Inside. I believe I believe it's inside, but I can't say for the people I'm talking about.
Okay.
I don't know. There's no way to identify the respondents in the survey. We did that on purpose because people are sharing pretty sensitive information. But
right.
I could probably jump in over here just because I lived that life a little bit. So I was like 1 to 30, even potentially a little bit more for a little bit. Then we eventually hired on a couple more, like 2 years in, give or take. And yeah, no, it's doable. I was both inside and outside. I guess like I was in the field and also did calls internally as well. It's doable. You're definitely not as or you're not doing as many high value activities outside of doing demos when you're kind of being spread out that thin. But yeah, no, it's doable for sure.
Did you have time to go to the bathroom?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, that's the most important thing.
What's interesting to me, to your point that you were talking about earlier, where you wanted to be on the calls with each person, each meeting.
I covered one. I covered one AE though.
Ah, yeah. See, once you're at like 4-to-1.
Yeah, it's more difficult.
How do you do that? And
maybe not the first. You have to be part of the discovery though. Find a way.
Right. Yeah, you really do. You really do. The way we pitch it is when they say, "Hey, great, I'd like to see the software," the AE can say, "Great, check your inbox," right? Because you've got a chameleon asset there that's going to adapt to what you want to see. It's going to show you the demo you want to see, and then and what we did with that. We had one customer, Trintech, and you can check out this case study on our website. But they had a 50% unqualified rate on their demos as far as the first demo where sales engineers were getting involved. They were at 50% unqualified, and they reduced that to less than 5. Their current unqualified demo rate is less than 5%, and the customers are getting that initial demo, that initial look at the software on demand. So that's why we do what we do. And my favorite thing to hear is, that SEs who use us, they say our first demo with customers is now like our second demo.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but because you want to be able to do that discovery with the prospect and be involved at that early stage. And it's just one way that you can do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know I could probably look this up, but sorry, just kind of quickly change courses a little bit. How many years have you all conducted the survey for?
This is our second year.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Maybe
Yep.
it's a little bit premature, I suppose, to say, kind of as you're doing the analyses for the current year. I guess it's about to be released relatively soon, but are there any drastic changes between last year's and this year's results?
No drastic changes, no.
No changes?
And which is kind of, I mean, I'd love to be able to tell you, oh, there's this massive change, but honestly, from a statistical standpoint, it's been a really nice thing to get our data last year validated again this year, because they're really just incremental changes, between the different metrics. It's largely the same. The median, the median, salary for practitioners is still like 120,000. It's pretty consistent across the board.
Yeah. And you don't. Go ahead, Ben.
Really quickly say, I feel like the biggest changes probably would have happened, like, say, even between 5 years ago and now, just because there's been such a rise in sales engineering resources between then and now, that I guess changes between this year and last year, you're right, it would only make sense to be incremental because how much.
Yeah.
And you also don't want to have a change during COVID. Like, status quo is good during a crisis.
That's exactly right.
Because usually it's to the negative. Anyways, we generally jump to the not so fire round at this point, which we will, but we might do it in a fire round succession. These are the same 4 questions. I tweaked the last one that we ask every guest, and would love to hear what you think. And Benny, you want to kick us off?
Yes, sir. So what do you love about pre-sales and sales engineering?
I love that it mimics how buyers want to buy. Our big thing is we want to make software purchases. We want to make buying software pleasant and fast and easy. And so pre-sales is absolutely the key to that. So if we had one place where we could say this is our key to a fantastic buying experience, it would be pre-sales, and that's why we devote all our time to serving the pre-sales industry. So
nice. All right. Now that you know what sales engineering is and it's not BDR, what do you see that could
you have to keep bringing that up? It's my shame.
When I see you in a couple of years, I'll bring that up too. What would you change about either the role or how SEs are treated?
Oh gosh, let's see. I don't have to change anything. The market is changing it, and it's changing it in a fashion that I'm really excited to see. I would, if I had my druthers, I would do what I'm doing, which is I would free up sales engineers from doing the robotic repetitive stuff and treat them more like the special forces, because that's really what they are in your sales team. They're the most highly trained. They're the most kind of high leverage asset that you can bring to bear in an opportunity. And I would like it kills me to, when the sales engineers are doing 5, 6 demos a week that are just the same demo. And a lot of people are devoting attention to this. Some are just trying to train SE teams up to the point where they do better demos and that kind of thing. We want to free them up to do the strategic consulting, to really focus on focus on those interactions that are going to move the needle the most.
Problem solving. Love that.
Yeah.
Nice.
All right, so the next one, and this will, I guess with this rather, we'll also leave a link to download the survey in here as well. But in addition to your survey, what are some other good books or tools or resources that you'd recommend for those in pre-sales, those aspiring to be in pre-sales, or just want to learn, or for those rather that want to learn more about it?
Oh gosh. Is it okay to plug the boss's book?
We already plugged it in the past, but you can plug it again.
All right, cool. So Garen, the CEO, he wrote this book on buyer enablement. You're not going to hear this around this because we don't spread it around, but he actually coined the term buyer enablement back in the day. We had an investor that that jumped on board with it, and they eventually got acquired by Gartner, which is why you see Gartner using that term all over the place as well. But and we love Gartner, so don't sue us, Gartner. But but buyer enablement. The book is on buyer enablement, and it's essentially about serving up the customer what they want, and framing your entire process of B2B sales not around where you want to be, not around whether, okay, are we at this, did we get to this point in our sales process, but rather, did we supply the buyer with what they needed at this point in their sales process, and even prescriptively and preemptively, right? So you as the basic premise is that you as the seller, you are the buying expert. You have been through the buying process for your solution more than your buyer has, right? This is their first time through. You are the expert in what they're going to need, the people they're going to need to involve, the assets they're going to need to see before they know it. And so buyer enablement is all about what can happen when you get precisely and aggressively prescriptive, not aggressively, but let's say when you get affirmatively prescriptive in your approach. And it's a fantastic book. Great for SEs if you want to jump in on that. SEs and AEs as well if you want to jump in on that. So
yeah, selling is hard, buying is harder.
Yeah, sorry, that's the title of the book. Yeah,
yeah. There's going to be a link in the show notes, so if anybody wants to check it out, they can do it there. Okay, last question of the not so fire round. Is there a habit you see good SEs have that bad SEs don't?
Oh, let's see. Good SEs that bad SEs don't.
Horrible SEs.
Yeah. I would say that there's I think that there's going to be a transition that goes on. I see two kinds of SEs sometimes, and I don't see a lot of this second type, but good SEs are like, I do more than demo, and my huge value is in the expertise that I bring to bear. And then we get other SEs that are like, just leave me alone. I just want to do my demos.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say that the second one is not going to be around very long, because it's going to be, the first one is going to be the one that's that endures as the position changes.
Nice. All right. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate you coming on. Last question of the day. If people want to reach out to connect with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, you bet. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, just John Cook at Consensus, and you can pretty much any interaction that you have on our website is going to come through me at some point. So if you fill out the form to get the survey, or if you watch our webinars or any of those kinds of things, there on the resources page, goconsensus.com/resources. You can see the buyer enablement webinar series. You can see the scaling pre-sales webinar series. All of that is going to eventually come across my desk, and if you reply to any of those emails that you get, it'll get to me. So
nice. Well, thanks, John, for coming on again, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
That's it. Anything surprised you about the survey?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I personally thought, I mean, I'm a new SE from Canada.
Newish. You've been in SE for like 4 years now. It's time. It's time for you to stop saying I'm a starting SE. You've been in SE for a while.
I guess you're right. No, yeah, I suppose you're right. It's weird actually how that's happened. I always say like whenever I speak to people, I met a neighbor not too long ago who she's just finishing up her university right now. Like we both went to the same school, so she asked like, "Oh, when did you graduate?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, graduated probably a couple of years ago." And then I realized, wait a second, no, I didn't. I graduated like 6 years ago, 5 years ago.
That's the thing. Like we moved to Canada in 2006. And people would ask me like, "Hey, when did you move to Canada?" I'm like, "Yeah, just a few years ago." And up until like 2016, I looked at the calendar. I'm like, "Dude, we've been here for 10 years." right? And now we've been here for 15 years. So
Crazy.
time flies. And I think when you have, I've talked to other SEs who've been doing this for 2-3 years, who still tell me, "Oh, we're new." You're new-ish, but you have more experience than those who just joined.
Sure.
You're no longer rookies. You're sophomores or whatever. Like if you go to the NBA or any sports, in the second year, you're expected to kind of perform a lot better than the first year. But because we're in a professional world like sales engineering, there is no first year. It's just a continuous blob of life. We don't think about, there's no off season.
Fair. It's a good way of thinking about it, though. Like, I actually like that sports analogy a lot, to think about how, after your first year, that is a good amount of time to kind of like get your feet comfortable. That once you kind of get going after that, you kind of get better. Although I would say that I am like maybe 8 months or so into a new role.
Yeah.
Sales engineering, but like in a new space, new software, entirely kind of unintuitive to me to a degree. And so,
well, it's like moving from like Michael Jordan moving from basketball to baseball.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. I had less gambling debts on my hand, but
he didn't have gambling debts.
Was it not gambling?
That's a misconception. Jordan, like, he gambled and he lost money.
Right.
Money that he had. Right. So just to be clear, he had the right to gamble his own money. It's not like he yeah. All right, go ahead.
I don't know.
Defend it as if Michael Jordan needed beats to defend him. But anyways.
Go take that personally. I was kidding. Not you, like the Jordan, the whole meme. Anyways, yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I guess like besides that, and you did bring up a good point when we were talking about it earlier that these people. Oh wait, I don't know if I finished my thought earlier. But
no, you didn't. I interrupted.
That's all good. I thought the salaries were a little bit high at first. As somebody that I guess is a little bit more relatively junior, but maybe not. But it could be also that the salaries in there, are from regions or whatever, from companies that typically have higher averages than what I'm used to. So
yeah, my experience, IT companies that sell to IT pay a lot of money. SaaS, the less complicated the software, the less salaries they pay. That's just, it's been my experience. The biggest thing that surprised me was, I don't know if that's the biggest thing, but one thing that surprised me is that SEs don't carry quota. I guess that's what surprised John, that SEs do carry quota. I'm surprised that they don't. I thought, hey, at least I know some SEs don't carry quota. I know you didn't carry quota in the previous job, but you did have bonuses based on performance, so that's quota, right?
Sure.
But yeah, maybe I should have clarified that a little bit more with them next time.
Yeah, something else that was interesting, if I remember right, is that the number of unqualified demos that are being done out there was really high. I think it was like 1 in 3, was it?
Yeah, 1 in 3. I wasn't surprised at all, though.
No, yeah, I mean, I guess so. Like, I'm obviously living in this bubble of like SEing best practices and like sales best practices over the last year or so. Excuse me. But yeah, I guess you're right. That's not really the norm.
Well, Kirk, was it? I can't remember. I think Kirk, we talked about him. He kind of forced his way into discovery calls so that he can qualify calls. And if you're an inside sales engineer, you just get a request to do a demo, and most likely the demo is not qualified by anybody. So yeah, I wasn't that surprised. I'm hoping we can help fix that problem, right? Through the podcast, through talking to people, and people are more aware of that. And Consensus is going to help. Like, this show is not sponsored by Consensus, but based on what we talked about after the call with John, it literally looks like a cool tool that I'm interested to see more.
For sure. No, agreed. And it's just cool to see, like, again, there's more attention being put on SEs and like what SEs can be doing and should be doing to help deals close. And I think that, as more people take these best practices in place and maybe recognize the value of qualifying things better, and just, I guess, show more value to the hiring managers that maybe didn't, and to those externally outside the SEing world that didn't necessarily know what SEs do. I don't know, I guess just the prestige of the role is just going to grow more and more as well. And so it's cool to have companies like Consensus and just every other one that we've had on as well, be supporting that cause. It's
yeah. Well, now we're being seen as more than a resource. We're seen as a team that adds value, which is like we talked about it in the next podcast. Like, I don't want to be a gopher. Right. I want to contribute. I want to be a partner, which is kind of a habit that Chris talks about all the time. Chris White, who's been on the show like 17 times. 18 to coming later this year, I guess, possibly, potentially. All right. So yeah, it was a very interesting call. I'm curious to hear what people thought about it, what surprised them. Check out the link to at least last year's report is going to be in the show notes. If the report is out by the time the show airs, we'll have that link as well, or at least a link where you can sign up to download it. So yeah.
The general consensus of the show, though, is that a good one.
All right. See ya. This is Ramsey for Bad Joke Benny signing off.